Hello, everyone. Welcome to Higher PhD's ACPSS YouTube series. I'm Divya. I'm the project manager at Higher PhD, which is a nonprofit organization that aims to help advanced degree holders by providing them necessary resources for a successful career transition. And ACPSS is short for Alternative Career Path Success Stories, which aims to expose our audience to the numerous career possibilities outside academia. ACPSS is one of the numerous initiatives by Higher PhD to help advanced degree holders unlock their potential and navigate career paths. I'm very excited to be the moderator for today's ACPSS episode. So today we have a very special guest with us, Paul. Paul is the founder of GenoWrite, a global life science communications agency. There, he writes marketing content for biotech companies worldwide. Paul holds an MSc in biology from McMaster University and went through a PhD in biochemistry and biomedical sciences also at McMaster University. During his graduate studies, he advocated for cystic fibrosis patients and bringing Takafta to Canada, wrote technical reports to municipal officials about groundwater contamination, and began a blog called Microbe Musings to share the latest microbiology news. Paul then solidified his love for science writing by helping freelancers and agencies write marketing content for biotech companies. In his spare time, Paul plays concert-level piano and violin, reads books, and plays soccer. So, Paul, welcome again. We are thrilled to have you today as our guest.
Thanks so much. And this is the logo for Gino, right? And it's great to be on this show.
Thank you so much. So let's start today's episode. Could you share about yourself and a little bit about your academic journey till now?
Sure. So I wanted to be a scientist for the longest of times. I started out doing my biology degree at an undergraduate level first. And then when I was done, I went on and decided to go straight to my master's in biology. So there I was studying groundwater contamination in a local community, basically. And so that project got me thinking, well, what if I could keep this going into my PhD and study the human microbiome? Because I was really interested in studying the gut microbiome at the time, and especially since I just learned about all the cool bacteria that were dwelling in our bodies and around the world during my master's. So I then went through my PhD to study the cystic fibrosis lung microbiome, as you kindly stated. And basically, that's when I went through my PhD at the Department of Biochemistry and Biomedical Sciences. And then from there, I decided to think, you know what, like I wanted to do something other than academia. So I went ahead and became a freelance writer. So that's just a quick little sum up of what I was doing before I founded GenoWrite.
Ah, that's awesome. Would you also like to share us like what prompted or inspired your decision to transition from academia to industry?
That's a good question. So I think the biggest thing that drove me to move on from academia into industry was just how much I loved writing, because I would say that throughout my PhD, like the research got pretty stressful, but then when I was able to just sit down and write about all the cool work I was doing, I thought, like, why not use the experience I had in writing reports and doing PowerPoint presentations and teaching people, which I really enjoyed so much, to make it a full-fledged career. And so that's when I did the advocacy work you talked about. That's when I started my own blog. And that's when I started looking at different freelance writers who could show me what it was like to be a freelancer, particularly in the biotech space, because I was always one to love learning about new things and just putting it into my life and just being like, okay, how can I tell people about all the awesome stuff that's going on in the life sciences? And so I think just that mixture of wanting to learn something new and wanting to communicate it was what prompted me to move on from academia and then contribute to industry the way that I have here.
That's really interesting, and we are happy to know that your love for writing could actually transformed into your career. But I'm sure this wasn't easy for you. So, what were some of the challenges you encountered during this transition process?
Oh, there were quite a few. Oh, it was not an easy transition. Like everyone who
Oh, I'm
says
sure.
that like the best that these transitions would be easy, they're not telling you the whole story. Because when I began my transition, I wasn't even sure where to start because starting out, there were just no resources at the university available for me to learn about all these careers. Like before I became a writer, I was thinking regulatory affairs, medical science liaison positions, market, product development. Like I was trying to get into all these different careers and just trying to learn about it. But the problem was that there were very few people in locally who could help me out. And that was despite me going to all the university resources that were available to be a McMaster. And basically, like after meeting with those people in McMaster, like the first thing I realized was I think my biggest thing I learned from them was networking. So I had to, so basically, from a guy who only had 200 connections, I had to find a way to know people and then build up my experience from connections from scratch. So that
Wow.
was really tough because I was just like, there was this great microbiome writer named Christina Campbell. I really wanted to get in touch with because my professor was just like my supervisor at the time was just like, she's a really good writer to like the lab group. And so I was like, you know what? I've got to find a way to get in touch with her. And honestly, if it wasn't for a stroke of luck, I would say, or like a blessing in disguise, like I wouldn't have been able to meet her because I was just on LinkedIn, like meeting different people, meeting other writers who were experienced in this field. And they invited me to a microbiology consultant group, which on Slack. And then they had a meetup. And during that meetup, that was when I met Christina and we got in touch. And that's when she put me under her wings to be my mentor. So I would say that was the first challenge, getting the networking done and just finding the doors that open. And the second thing is why you have to do that while you're still doing your PhD. And I didn't get many chances to travel. I would say arguably none at all. And it was really hard for me to get any opportunities to network. So I had to do everything online. And especially during the pandemic, when things got really brutal, I was it's really hard to go out there and reach out to people. So, and then to do that while you're still trying to finish up your research, which could take up a heck of a lot of time, like it can be really tiring. It can be really stressful, and it can be really daunting. So I would say that, and even after I figured out the networking part, I found that was something that I still had to keep learning every day because as you start as a freelancer, like one piece of advice I got was don't think about living by yourself if you're starting as a freelancer because you'll need to figure out a way to make your ends meet in the meantime. And for someone like me, that was really applicable because I had to basically start with no cash, basically. Like there was I had no income to speak of to start. And it was all about me building up my portfolio, building up the connections, and taking the time to find the right people who could help me get to where I am today. And honestly, like that's what led me to an agency that I worked for called Boflin Communications, where they basically took me under their wings for a year and taught me how to write. So that was basically how I became an agency writer for about a little over a year. And then in that ensuing time, I was like, okay, I want to start my own business. I've got some experience, and I had a dry season with the work, and I needed to find my own clients soon. So yeah, you can imagine, like at that time, even after I got the agency work down, I was still at about a little over 200 connections, and I had to build my network from scratch. And it took a little over a year's worth of constant networking. And now I'm
Wow.
at 1,800 connections and counting. So it was,
Wow, that's impressive.
yeah, it was not easy. I had to really be aggressive with the marketing. I had to learn how to reach out to people. It all started out with just, hi, like I write stuff. I have experience. Do you have work for me? And then eventually morphed into This was the third challenge. How do I show people that I am capable of helping them? What can I offer them? And trying to figure that out. And so it took a lot of me just saying, like, okay, coming up with things I could offer, like interviews, social media posts, shout outs, stuff like that, just to show that I could offer exposure and reach for the people I was talking to. And so that takes time. That all takes time. And that's where the final challenge is. It's being patient with the process, being patient with yourself, and knowing that being a freelancer, starting your own business is not, it's not something you just do like on a snap of a finger. It takes time. And I think a lot of people forget that amid the excitement of starting your own life and having all this freedom to do what you want for yourself. It takes time to get there, and there will be dry seasons, and it's not going to be easy. So I would say those are the four challenges I went through.
Thank you so much for sharing. So, since you have experienced both the words, how was could you share some insights into the differences between academia and the industry that you have experienced firsthand?
Hmm. I'm pausing because there's quite a lot of differences. Um,
Okay.
First off is I think the biggest difference is what I learned from another person I spoke with. Because when you're in academia, you're given a research project and it's your job to figure things out and find the absolute answers to whatever pressing academic question you've got. And I find that in that time space, you're so focused on solving that one problem by yourself with few collaborators that you could have collaborators, but a lot of the time, but most of the time, they'll expect you to solve the problem by yourself because that's what academia is all about. Like you have to find the correct answer, answer all the detractors, address all the issues, do all the experiments, do all the research by yourself. Whereas in industry, I've noticed that it's a team effort. They have people working in different fields and different departments, and the company dynamic really changes. It's different, and it's different compared to academia. Like it could change with personnel. It could change with the whoever's leading the company. It changes depending on who's supervising you in your department. And it becomes one giant ecosystem within the company where you all have to work together to solve a problem. And the thing is too, is they're not just in biotech, this is another difference. They're not just looking for one solution, one um I would say one like uh correct answer, but rather you're trying to come up with the best answer to help the companies make the return on investment. So it becomes much more about what you, so basically in academia, it's more so, can you do this experiment? Do you know how to do this technique? Can you do it well? Can you think and answer problems by yourself? Whereas in biotech, it's can you work with a team? Can you offer us something that we need at this very moment? And can you also like learn to seek help when needed? Can you, like, the independence part is still there, but you're contextualizing it all within a team. And basically, like as my mentor said, it's like a game of sorts where you have the rule set, but there's many strategies you can do to solve the problem. Whereas in academia, it's use this technique, you better use it right or else. And whatever question you ask, you better answer it properly or else. Like you still get that at biotech in some ways, but it's much more flexible and versatile. And so I would say that's the one difference. I think another difference is academia really stresses a lot of importance on publications. And
Yeah.
they talk so much about like, oh yeah, you better turn out a paper every year to get a chance of being a professor. Whereas when you step out of academia and get into industry, that's the last thing they're asking. They don't actually care about how many papers you've published. And every person I've spoken to about what it's like in biotech has said that. And it becomes much more about what skills do you have? What can you give to the company? And does the company need it? And so they care a lot less about publications because they'll just see the publications and think, okay, great, you can work by yourself, but can you do do you know this particular regulation? Do you know this regulation? Do you know how to get investment from venture capitalists? Like stuff like that. It's the questions are extremely different. And I think people fail to realize in academia that a lot of the stuff they're doing is very specific to academia. And on the flip side, like this shouldn't stop academic people from getting into industry because they have lots of skill sets they can provide to industry. It's just not the ones you expect to see in academia. I'd say the last big difference is I would say I'd like to think it like the finances are very different. Like in academia, you're dependent on constant stream of grants and funding to continue your research. And the money that you get in grants, I've noticed, is far less than what I've seen in biotech. Like when people are fighting, like are advocating for and trying to get money into their company, like they speak out to a lot of investors who could pour out millions upon millions of dollars. And it's because there's this underlying belief that you take whatever you learn in academia, all the hard science stuff, all the principles, and then apply it to solve a problem that society's facing. And like society's facing a lot of problems, like high rates of cancer, or maybe like antibiotic resistance, or climate change, and the like. And so people are willing to pour out gobs of money to find those solutions to help sustain our world and sustain human health because they're working to not only come up with a solution, but to make it commercially viable, to make it available for people to use, from scientists to patients to government officials. It could be a whole wide array of customers. And so like it's not to say that people in academia like aren't doing important things. They are. It's just in academia, I remember there's a joke that we often say in our labs where it's like, oh, my thesis is only going to be read by 3 people, committee 1, 2, and 3. And whereas in biotech, if you market yourself well enough, like it's not to say you can't do that in academia. It's just in industry you get that sense a lot more because people are sinking in money to help the company succeed, whether it's big pharma, an investor, or whoever. And so I would say the finances between the two is the other difference, just because of what purposes they're trying to serve.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for painting such vivid picture for our viewers. So
Hmm.
these are some important differences that you have highlighted between academia and industry and how things work. So now we would like to know, how did you leverage your academic skills and knowledge to transition into this industrial role?
I would say the biggest skill that I had to leverage was my ability to learn something new. Because as a writer, very rarely will you get work that fits within your wheelhouse, within your, or so should I say, your field of expertise. And so what PhD students often don't recognize is just how much they can research, like how much they can learn something new so quickly, especially in the life sciences, because oftentimes we're inundated with a lot of talks, a lot of speeches about various topics that have nothing to do with what we're researching. Like when I was at McMaster, I even though I was working on cystic fibrosis lung microbiome, I was constantly exposed to immunology research and to gut microbiome research, as well as cancer research, even because we have there's a cancer institute at McMaster. So it's like researchers have to really understand they're be constantly exposed to diverse work, and if they could show that versatility in their resume or in their portfolio, it it means a lot for the biotech companies. So I leveraged that a lot because my very first assignment had nothing to do with my research project, even though it was about the microbiome. I think I was talking about the gut liver axis, and I was just like, I didn't even know there was such thing as a gut liver axis because no one was really talking about it my labs, right? So, and I had to learn how to do that research and put all my thoughts together and write a cohesive and coherent and convincing article, the three C's: cohesive, convincing, and coherent. So I had to learn those three C's by being in academia, despite the writing style being extremely different in marketing as opposed to academic work. So I think just by learning how to do my research, to put my thoughts together, and to write in a way that moves people and convinces them, or to help them and understand something, to give them that spark. I think I learned those skills during my PhD, and that's how I was able to found GenoWrite. That's how I was able to, because a lot of common question my potential clients will tell me is, hey, you've never written on this space before, so how are you going to write about it? And I was like, my default responses is I've written on so many diverse topics, and I just point them to my proteomics articles. Like, I knew I only touched a mass spec once in my life, and and I'm proud to say, like, when I wrote those articles, they were like, oh my gosh, you really got the proteomics on point. And I was like, I only touched a mass spec once, you know. So I would say the biggest skills I had to leverage from academia was my ability to read papers, put my thoughts together, and write in a way that catches at the science accurately, but also moves people to do stuff with it.
Nice that you how you explained it. So now that we have talked about the skills that are needed and how you transferred it to the industry and the differences, would you like to share something about the benefits or the opportunities that you have because you moved to industry?
Oh, I gush so much at how many people I've been able to speak to, both big and small. Like I've worked with like multi-billion dollar valuation companies. I've worked with startups. I've worked with companies across 5 different continents in the world. And I would say that was the most unexpected benefit of all. The fact that I've worked with so many people around the world, because I really embraced the need to network like crazy, especially online. And it's given me the benefit of staying at home to care for my family, to care for my loved ones, and have that work-life balance to enjoy playing music and reading books and all these other things by staying at home. And yet I still have the world on my fingertips through the internet. Like, the pandemic was such a benefit for me in that sense, because I was able to just say to a person in Germany, for example, oh, hey, could we meet at your afternoon time zone, my morning, and then we'll talk over Zoom. And it's just like, it's just so cool. Like, I get to hear so many people's experiences. I get to hear so many stories. I get to help people all around the world with all kinds of things, from like the omics to automation to cancer research. Like, I cover everything. It has it all. And I think the biggest benefit of me transitioning to industry like this was just how much exposure I had of the biotech industry, and how many people I've met, and how I could do it all from the comfort of my home.
Yeah, so that's really good to hear these kind of benefits from your work style. It is giving you a proper work-life balance. So I'm sure you love these benefits of your job. Did you face any skepticism or resistance from either academic peers or industry professionals regarding your transition?
Hmm.
That's
so
interesting.
so so throughout my whole thesis, like, my professor, I'm going to confess, like, was unsupportive in so many ways. I won't go into the details, but one thing he particularly drilled into me was how bad of a writer I was, and how much I had to uh change my approach. And I took his words to heart, because I was like, how do I change and be a better writer? That's why I reached out to all these people. So as mean as the criticism was, I found it really helpful. Now, the problem is when I try to change my ways and I just wasn't able to receive any more help. Like my professor was extremely unhelpful. It would take him months to get back to me with any of my work. So I yeah, that was a big struggle. And I think that's largely why I didn't really come to him with any of the career advice. I had to do it all by myself. And on top of that, like my lab mates were all really focused on getting into academia. So it wasn't that I got skepticism. I got skepticism or resistance after I told them the fact. It was I suspected they would give me all that before when I told them. So I decided not to tell them. And basically, they only knew that I left like and moved on to the work I did at GenoWrite after I withdrew. So it was because I figured they would give me those reactions that I didn't tell them anything about what I was doing in my last days and just doing all this transitioning. Like I was, by the time I transitioned away from academia, I was already working for the agency for at least 6 months.
Oh, all right. So it seems like your experience, your networking with people, it really paid off, although you did not have that much support from your academic peers, but you
Yeah,
got this opportunity. So, since we are on this topic of getting opportunities outside academia and networking, can you discuss the role of networking and the professional relationships in this transition that you took?
I would say it played a huge role. Like because no one in my lab or my colleagues was really able to help, I had to do it all by myself. And so I ended up networking with a number of LinkedIn like coaches who were specialized in the life sciences. Like I could suggest you some like Ollie Devon, David Giltner, Martina Neville, like they're all my network. So if you ask me for them, I'm happy to give you a list. And I came across those people, spoke with them, learned about what it was like to be a marketer, to be a writer, and the like. And they pointed me in the right direction. They were all extremely helpful, extremely supportive, and it basically like really helped push me forward with my life when I was isolated at home finishing my thesis because like my professor at the time had no more funding. Like I was working for literally nothing. And so I had to find a way to that made it really urgent that I had to learn how to network on LinkedIn because that was my only way out. So I had to find people on LinkedIn, go online, find these networking groups, and basically change my career track. So, long story short, I would say networking was everything. Without the networking, I would not have found a Gino, right?
Amazing. So, since you have explained how much networking and making meaningful connections was important for you to hop on this career transition, so looking back, is there any advice you wish you had received or any acts you wish that you would have done something differently that would have made this transition more easier for you?
The only thing I would have changed is I wish I did it sooner. I wish I wasn't floundering about these different career paths and I just went straight into writing and just learning about it. But I mean, everything happens for a cause, I believe. And with the current path I took, I still got here anyway. And that's the most important thing to me. But yeah, if there was one thing I changed, it would be to do it earlier, to network far earlier, to to not be so chained to my supervisor and his opinion of me to define who I was as a person and to start exploring options for myself if when my local community wouldn't give it. So yeah, I would say if you're in a similar position where you're stuck and you're not getting much support locally, get on LinkedIn, network hard, and get your advice outside. And that no one in academia really has to know. Like you could do this in your own time, and so long as you're not breaking any rules, which I didn't, like I don't condone breaking any rules. You just go ahead and network. Like there's nothing wrong with networking on your own time. And I would advise highly to do that even when your work is successful, because as soon as you step out of academia industry and you don't have connections, it's going to be very hard to get opportunities.
All right. So you are a big supporter of networking, and as you have shared with us that LinkedIn was the major platform that you used for networking and building up a portfolio. So could you share any other resources apart from LinkedIn that you found helpful, which helped you make this transition?
Good question. So in my bookshelves, which are behind me, which you don't see, are actually a number of books I would highly recommend. If you don't mind, I could take a moment to fetch them for you. Um, so let me see. I will go fetch them for you. So there are actually 4 books I would recommend. And that's on top of a few others like Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. I highly recommend that one. If you want to learn about the biotech industry, I highly recommend Building Backwards to Biotech by Stephanie Wisner. It basically teaches everything you need to know about what successful biotech companies do and the kinds of culture that you would be involved with when growing the biotech industry and working in industry. That's the first book I would recommend. If you want to learn more about the biotech industry's inner workings and everything that goes underneath with the founders and investors, read The $1 Billion Molecule. I'm halfway through it, and it's the story of Vertex Pharmaceuticals. I highly recommend it. There's also 2 parts. There's a second part, I believe, called The Antidote. So this book and The Antidote's another. I highly recommend it. I also like this one a lot, How to Start a Life Science Company. So if you're like a person in academia who is really interested in learning about being a founder and you've got this really cool idea you want to share that you think would revolutionize the world, yes, read this book too, because I find that a lot of people in academia don't necessarily have the skills to be entrepreneurs, and there's not many resources in academia to provide for people who want to get into entrepreneurship. So yeah, How to Start a Life Science Company by Leah Cannon is another book I recommend. And lastly, for the science writers out there, my mentor recommended me this book, The Craft of Science Writing. So a lot of this book focuses on journalistic writing, but the advice here could also apply to, let's say, pitching for a biotech company, pitching for a medical writing organization, pitching to whoever. So yeah, so The Craft of Science Writing, edited by Siri Carpenter. That's my last recommendation.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing your private book collection with the viewers today. I'm sure every viewer of ours will definitely appreciate it. So it has been incredible to know about your career transition from academia to industry, which time was not easy, but you did it. You made it a career for yourself. At last, I would like to request you to share a take-home message with our viewers, that something that you would like to remain with them.
Okay, I would say my biggest take-home message is if you want to transition into industry, don't be afraid to take that first step and meet someone who's working in industry, whether at a trade show, conference, academic meetup, networking event, whatever. If your heart's interested in that and being in industry, take that first step. And I actually, during my PhD, I spoke with my former teaching assistant supervisor, and she told me, don't be afraid to dream big and get rejected, because you're not going to regret dreaming big.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your inspiring as well as kind words, Paul. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're very welcome, Divya. My pleasure.
Thank you. And I hope we'll have you back soon with another episode on ACPSS Higher PhD. So thank you, Paul, for sharing your career transition with us. I am sure it would help a lot of our viewers and subscribers to hop on their own transition journey and to be more confident and have a plan of what to do next. So before we end this episode, I would just like to thank everyone who works on the back end of Higher PhD to make these videos a huge success. And thank you so much for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone.